Hey everyone, so good to see you all. I am going to see, there we go. Could I ask you all to mute your computers, please, so we don't have any kind of sound bites coming in? Katie, I'm not looking at you, really. Katie Marsh, that is. Kate Marsh. It is so great to see you all on our monthly Zoom call. And I really want to, before I get too far, I really need a shout out to Nicole Dewey and Cindy Spiegel, who's at Spiegel and Growl, because they connected me to Bruce. And Bruce, his arc arrived in my mail in February, announcing this book was going to be coming out in October. And then stuff happened. So I am thrilled that Bruce, you're with us, joining us. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about where you're coming from. I think you were at a beautiful lake, hopefully not with AI complications, but welcome. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about yourself, where you're located.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm actually zooming in from Charlottesville, Virginia. I am an English professor at the University of Virginia, and that's my day job. I teach medieval literature, and my family, we were just at in New Hampshire and in the Adirondacks visiting friends at a couple different lakes after my book tour in July. So I'm just back here now. The semester starts soon. I'm actually not teaching, but we're doing a lot about AI around our syllabi and students and so on. So yeah, I'm just sitting in my living room. My cat is walking across the floor. I see a baby or two. So yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Don.
Bruce, we want to get into some of your catalog, but before we go too far, Oprah Book Club selection. How does
Yeah.
that happen? Tell us, when I got this, it's clearly said coming from Spiegel and Growl October 7th. And then the next thing I know, it's an Oprah pick. Share a little bit about that experience for you as a writer, as an author.
Sure. Yeah. And can I ask you first, just because I always want to make sure I know what kind of audience I'm talking to. So what generally who are your most of your listeners, the folks here, and
So
what brings them to you?
so I'm a literary agent, and you're
Right.
looking at a group of fine writers. Some have
That's what
been
I thought.
published, and some are yet to be published. Some in fiction, some in nonfiction. So you've got a mix of both. We're all readers, and yeah, so that's who you're looking at on this break.
Okay, great. That's really helpful actually because I felt like I recognized some names. So it's usually yeah, you just never know. So good. Yeah, so the Oprah pick, so the well, you all then will appreciate the kind of inside baseball of it. So as you know, the ARC goes out. It can be up to 9, 10 months before your book is published, the advance copy. And they send it out, your publisher sends it out to independent bookstores, to places like Kirkus, New York Times, just trying to get coverage, attention, trying to get it on the Indie Next list. So I'm just bopping along. We're in early May. I get a call from my publisher saying, "Hey, we need to talk about something. We may have to move your pub date." And I thought, what do you mean? And she said, well, it looks like we may be publishing in July. And I said, oh man, July of 2026. And she said, no, 2 months from now. And I just I was and there was no explanation, and I was kind of devastated because I thought, oh, this so that means there's absolutely no chance to get on any lists of like the most anticipated books of, and my other novels had sometimes gotten on those lists, and so I was really worried. I had no idea what was going on, and then about a week later, then they wanted to make sure if it was going to come out in July, that I was free on a couple of different weekends, that I was free to do some events in early July. I said, well, I guess I could. I'd have to cancel this trip to Denmark with my wife. And so I was really distressed. And I felt like it just, something was going on that I didn't understand. And then I'm in Washington I was a judge on the Penn Faulkner Awards last year for last year's books. and I'm getting ironing a shirt, getting ready to go to the banquet, and I have a publicity call with I think just my publicist and marketing people talking about things. I say, okay, I do that call, and she says, well, the Zoom link is broken. My Zoom is screwed up. You're going to get a phone call. Make sure you pick it up right at 2. So I'm, turn the iron off a minute before 2, just hop on the bed, get my phone ready, and there's a phone call from an unknown number, and I pick it up, and it's Oprah, and then that has been my last 2 months. So it happened so quickly, so insanely. I wasn't prepared for it all. I'm a happily Joe mid-list guy for my whole career. So it's been completely crazy.
Now, Bruce, your first book, Music, Body, and Desire in Medieval Culture, a blockbuster to be sure.
Yes.
Um,
I think it may have sold 300 copies. Yeah.
wow, yeah, for sure. How did you go from that then into fiction? How was that
Yeah.
transition?
Yeah. So that book was published in, I think, the year 2000 or 2001 by Stanford University Press. It's basically a revision of my dissertation. So I've published all through my career. I've published academic books with books on a lot of different topics like music and medieval culture. My most recent one was a book about the history of parchment, which is the medium, the animal skins that were the equivalent of medieval paper that manuscripts were written on. So I've written a lot of academic books over my career. It was really only in I guess early maybe 2006 or 7 that I started writing fiction. And there was a year that my wife was in Wisconsin. I had done everything I needed to do for tenure, and I decided I wanted to write a thriller. So I just spent a lot of time that year writing a thriller. I didn't get an agent. Didn't get an agent for the next book I tried to write. And then finally, when I did, she couldn't sell the book that I got her with, and then she encouraged me to write a thriller or a novel set in the Middle Ages, the period that I teach and study, and that was a burnable book, and that was my first novel, which was published in 2014 by William Morrow. Then I did 2 historical novels with them. They dropped me. I did 2 contemporary family dramas with Riverhead. Those are the Gifted School and The Displacements. And then they dropped me. And then, then I just kind of went into the howling wilderness of being in my, being without a contract or a publisher. And that's when I just kind of went deep and wrote Culpability and kind of came out of that. And I may be giving you more information than you need, but I'm just giving you the trajectory here of how I go. I mean, I'm
No,
still an academic writer. That's my primary thing I do is write and research the Middle Ages and teach. But that's my fiction career in a nutshell.
no, that's fascinating. And I'll remind you that if you have some questions, we should have time at the end for you to ask them. Just shoot me a question through the chat, and we'll get you in front of Bruce. Bruce, family is front and center in the books that I've read. Certainly with Noah and Lorelai and Culpability. You have the story of Daphne and her kids leaving during that maelstrom in Florida. What's the genesis of that? What's informed your writing of their stories, varied as they are?
Yeah, so I love writing about contemporary families and their implosions, like a family where everything seems to be going well, and then you just kind of drop a piece of dynamite into the middle of the family and see what happens. And that, I would say that's my last 3 books and the one I'm working on now. Um, and in this case, I wanted from the beginning, it's a story about I don't know how many of you have looked at it. It's a story about a family dealing with mostly with the aftermath of a car accident. And I knew from the beginning that it was going to be on that theme, just a family going through a catastrophe. This accident takes the lives of the people in the other car on the highway that day. Um, and the son of the family, 17 years old, kind of lacrosse star, superstar athlete, about to go off to college on a lacrosse scholarship, and he's at the wheel that day, but he's not driving. The AI or an autonomous system is driving the car. And from the beginning, I kind of had that scenario, and I was thinking about, moral responsibility, who or what is responsible, but I wasn't really thinking about it as a novel about AI at all. That phrase wasn't even in my head, and it was only after I was writing it in 2022, and it was only after the explosion of ChatGPT late that year and early the next that I started realizing I do think this maybe this is a novel about artificial intelligence and the way that it's intersecting a family. And so Lorelei Shaw, she's the mom and wife in this family. She's a brilliant world-leading figure in the field of ethical AI. Her husband Noah is a corporate lawyer. He's kind of in awe of her, and in law of her, I guess. He just looks up to her, and she's a mystery to him in so many ways. And then the kids are interacting with, one of them is interacting with the chatbot. They're all on their phones, as our kids are. Um, and so I thought very carefully about ways that AI is seeping into the lives of this family and what that might look like. And that creates a lot of the suspense and the drama as the novel unfolds.
Yes, very strong. It's such a fascinating read. I know some of you got copies of it. Susan Fish is saying she read it and really enjoyed it. Um, what concerns do you have as both a human and a writer, and an academician,
Yeah.
about AI?
Yeah. So I worry a lot about my students, my the students and my colleagues in some ways, just I think you all agree if you're writers, the one of our big struggles is process, right? What happens to get from, you're beginning your chapter and you have someone in a particular scenario and you need to get them out of that chapter. And getting from A to B or A to Z is a process of stringing words together and sentences together. And that takes thought, it takes deliberation, concentration. It is a process. I think of it as a kind of sacred process that has been with writers for thousands of years, since the pre-Socratics and the Western tradition. Since it's just goes all the way back to Gilgamesh and whatever. And I worry that that is the process with AI, unlike any other writing technology that I think we've had with large language models. That process is being forestalled or forsaken. That's my big worry with that particular element of AI. But it's also affecting reading. I I was downloading an ebook or looking at an ebook on my libraries in my library catalog, and we have a lot of ebooks which are great in our library system now. And I was just using the e-reader to check a fact on an academic article I was working on, and a little AI assistant popped up and said, "Would you like me to help summarize this for you?" On my university's library system, right? In my library catalog. It wasn't the part of the browser. It was part of the library system. I thought, oh my God. So this is now, it's like Insta Cliffs Notes, right? Just popping up off any library server. So that again is just interfering with that sacred process of reading. Um, and then in the broader sense, I worry greatly about chatbots and what they're doing to young people. I worry about all kinds of things. At the same time, I don't know how many of you have been in a Waymo. I rode a couple of Waymos, these automated taxis driven by AI systems out in San Francisco and LA when I was on tour for my last book, and they are part of what gave me the idea for this book. I was in one recently, and I don't know. I felt a lot safer than I did in the Uber next morning going to the airport, right? Because an Uber driver, they're really busy people. They rely on gig work. They want to get the next ride, rightly so. And how many times have you been in an Uber where the driver was not on their cell phone, right? So part of me, and I know there's a lot of medical technology now that's relying on machine learning and to do more effective diagnosis. So it's a double-edged sword, or it's the morality of it is not clear cut. So I wanted Culpability, the novel, to be thinking about that the ambiguity, the moral ambiguity of AI. It's not white or black. It's all over the place. And Lorelei as a character is really devoted to making AI systems good, making them ethical. She really believes in it. It's part of what explains everything that happens in the book.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Um, we want you'll have some moments to ask questions. So if you want to have a
Oh, and
question,
I have plenty of time too. I'm not in a rush to get off, so yeah,
well,
don't
well,
worry.
thank you, Bruce. I try to respect everybody's busy schedules, including yours. Editors can be a writer's best friend. You've had editors at Morrow, at Riverhead, and then now with Cindy Spiegel and the Spiegel and Grau folks. Um, Share a little bit about that from the process you've experienced along the way from academic to even general trade.
Yeah, so my academic editors have usually been pretty hands off. It's very different than fiction editing, where because with academic, when you're working with a university press, I don't know how many of you have ever done that, had that experience. Your book will get sent off to three or four scholars who will write peer reviews, and there'll be long, detailed reports on all the ways that you screwed up and the things that you need to do to make your book better. Um, and so basically, you're almost getting three or four edit letters. And so the editor's job is to just kind of channel those for you, and help you figure out how to make revisions to your book. With fiction, it's a completely different kind of thing. And I've now had three fiction editors, all absolutely wonderful, just brilliant people who have seen into the books that I write in ways that I haven't. But I get, people who have given me very few notes, but just a few fantastic comments that made me completely rethink what I was doing. I've also had 15-page single-spaced edit letters, and everything in between. So I think that the experience of writing fiction, you're lucky if you have an editor who spends a lot of time telling you what she thinks. In my cases, it's all been she, and being really attentive. It's a gift, a really good read of your novel, where you're given lots of suggestions. It can throw you into despair, but it's also just a huge gift.
Yeah. We have a few questions here for you, Bruce. Beth is joining us from somewhere in Michigan, I think. Go ahead, Beth.
Go Blue. I was at
Indeed.
Michigan alum. Yeah.
Oh, go blue.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. Thanks, Bruce. This is fascinating. Our lives are being turned upside down by a chatbot named Claude, who has so many suggestions for our lives. It's just incredible. But my question is more of a technical one. I've just finished a novel that has texting scenes, and I understand that your novel has kids who are texting. How
Yeah.
does this work out on the page? Because
Yeah.
kids text in acronyms, and yet
Yes.
the readers, may not understand what they are. Do you have a glossary? I mean,
No.
footnotes
They,
seem
they they
weird.
look like this. I'll put this close to the camera. If you can pin it, you can kind
Okay.
of see how it works.
Okay.
So
So the
it's really up to
translation
the
is on the,
Yeah. So I used mine was pretty heavily abbreviated, but I did it in a way and I ran it across some tweens, just to make sure they could understand it. Um, that's part of my research for the novel. And, it really, you just format it the way you want, as simply as possible so you can tell who's texting. And then your page designer will take it from there, right? Because there's a whole element of publishing where the interior designs are really important. And I have a lot of like extra textual elements in my books, that need a lot of graphic attention. So I work pretty closely with the page designer to make sure those look exactly how I want them to. So make sure all that's important in your manuscript is that it's clear who's texting when.
great. Thank you so much. That's really
I
helpful.
also, this is just getting way too technical. I recommend editors and Don, you probably agree, agents want to see a double-spaced manuscript. That's the convention. But
Yeah,
put those little elements in single space. I really think it makes them pop more and separates them a little bit from the, I don't know if you agree, Don, but that's
yeah,
something that I do. It just makes it better on the page.
yeah. That's good. That's good. Um, Kyle Castro is joining us from somewhere in Tennessee. Go ahead, Kyle.
Hey, it's so great to meet you, Bruce. And I was one of the
Thank
lucky
you.
ones to win the book, and it's fantastic. My day job, unfortunately, happens to be in AI. I'm trying to get out of it as fast as possible. But I wanted to talk about Philip K. Dick, actually. He's one of my biggest inspirations. He wrote a lot about some of the conundrums we face today as early as 1959. I think
Hmm.
I think the short story for Total Recall, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, was written in 1968,
Yeah.
which is very predictive. But he was predicting, you were writing in the middle of it, and it's in the very beginning. What is it like to write something that talks about what we're facing today, but knowing that it's going to change by the second? Because my day job, I'm seeing it change by the second. As a writer, I'm seeing
Yeah.
it change by the second. What's it like to almost actively report, but through a fiction lens?
That's a wonderful way of putting it, to actively report through a fiction lens. So I like to think of my these last three novels and the one I'm working on now, kind of writing at the edge of our moment, at the edge of our present. They're not science fiction like Philip K. Dick or Asimov. They're not speculative fiction. They're very much contemporary realism, but with I guess, a predictive twist or something like that. So my The Gifted School, two novels ago, that was about the college. That was about bushy parents trying to get their kids into a school for exceptionally gifted children. And that ARC was circulating right when the Varsity Blues scandal broke. So it got scripted into, I think the Wall Street Journal called it the novel that predicted the college admissions scandal. It got this kind of people read it as almost prophetic in a way, which was silly because it was just lucky. It was just a publicist's dream, I think, that timing. And then The Displacements, my last novel, was about climate displacement, and it took place in southern Miami, southern Florida, and it was about the world's first Category 6 hurricane. There hasn't been one yet, but news stories in the last 2 years have been wondering what it would look like. So I'm so it's it's newsy, it's zeitgeisty, but it's thinking about our moment and the kind of the edges of our moment. And I think AI is a perfect technology for that. This is not about AI technology that will be around in 5 or 10 years. It's about right now, as you point out, Kyle. And so I think, well, there was an example, and this goes back to Don's earlier question about working with editors. When The Displacements was in revision, my second revision, it was in March of 2020, and the pandemic hit, and everybody was going inside. And within a few weeks, we realized how much the world was going to be changing in the next couple of years. And my editor was like, "Well, look, this book is set like basically next year, so you need to think about how you're going to deal with the pandemic." And so there were three or four references to the pandemic in the novel, and it was something that had happened like last year. So and I think it ended up working because by the time it came out, it's not like the pandemic was over, but we were moving around again. Um, and so there was still some paranoia, there was still some masking going on, and the novel was right in that moment. So again, and then for this novel, there's I was really thinking about it became a novel about artificial intelligence at the moment it became possible to write, I guess, about all these different tools, but it's not futuristic in that way, about in the way that science fiction might be.
For
Does that
sure.
answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for the answer.
And Bruce, I would just add that you beautifully capture the poignancy of family relationships. You know, the Daphne in that story, that novel. There and in the culpability, there's a very poignant scene with Noah looking at his son and thinking of how he's fathering him. So while ripped from the headlines, you're also writing these very poignant drama family stories. Um,
Thank
Callie
you.
Murray is joining us from Georgia.
Hey, Bruce.
Hi there.
Um, Asking for some more insider baseball. So,
Yes.
left culpability, it felt like an obvious Oprah choice to me. At the moment, just the story, all of it. But what's been surprising about the Oprah selection for you? Whether it's good surprising, not good surprising.
Yeah. That it happened at all. And thank you for your kind words. But I still don't believe it. I mean, this whole thing could be an AI fantasy. You know, because honestly, there's 100 novels that were published this summer that could have been her summer pick. Um, and I I think the surprising okay, the the really surprising thing is that suddenly I'm an expert on AI, right? So you know that when you're writing not on when you're writing fiction, your research is very broad but not that deep, right? Like maybe if you're writing something in the French Revolution, yeah, you're going to read a lot about the French Revolution, but are you going to spend 3 years reading about breakfast during the French Revolution? No, you're going to spend like the 10 minutes you need figuring out exactly what this person might have eaten, right, on that particular morning in that location, or maybe an hour, right? And so I did a lot of research on AI, but I'm hardly an expert, right? So, and yet suddenly I'm getting called on for all these speaking things about AI. And I'm perfectly happy to accept those invitations. But it's weird the way a book, even a novel, can suddenly make you, uh, someone who is invested with a certain kind of authority. I think the other surprise has just been attention. I'm not a private person, and I've published before, so I know what publicity is like. But it's been kind of overwhelming. The and wonderful, but it's a little difficult to negotiate, I guess. So I'm still figuring it out. It's only been like a few weeks, really 5 weeks since it came out, so it's like this flood hitting me. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's wonderful. Yeah.
By the way, for the record, I said to Cindy Spiegel in March this would be a summer book before Oprah. So just so you know, just
Well, she got so outraged that we were even thinking of publishing it in the fall. She looked at the cover like this. She said this on on the show. She
yeah,
goes, "That's a summer book. What were they thinking? What were your publishers thinking?" So it's almost like she was rescuing it from being published in the fall. It was hilarious. Yeah.
yeah, that's funny. Let's see. We have a question from Susan Fish, who's joining us somewhere in Canada. Susan. Okay, I don't know that Susan's with us anymore. Oh no, Susan, go ahead. Okay, well, we'll come back to Susan. Uh, I don't know if tariffs affect Zoom. Who knows? Um, Katie Marsh, go ahead with your question, Kate.
Sorry, you're going to hear some like slobber
No
spitting around
worries.
my arm while I ask the question. Yeah, so I was really interested in your background in medieval literature and then this leap into very contemporary sort of thriller slash family drama fiction writing. And I was wondering if you found or you noticed that despite the sort of radical shift in subject matter, do you see any, are you influenced or is your writing formed at all by your study of medieval literature? Or do you feel like they're just completely separate endeavors?
Yeah, well, like I said, my first two novels were set in the Middle Ages. So I
Oh,
used a
right, right,
lot
right.
of kind of medieval storytelling techniques. There was a kind of embedded romance in one of them. For one of them, there was it was about a book of prophecies circulating in late medieval England, and I actually wrote the book of prophecies in Middle English. So was using my own knowledge of medieval literature to create some of the narrative fabric of those novels. But I love stories within stories, frame narratives like the Canterbury Tales, like Boccaccio's Decameron, like 1001 Nights. So often in my novels, you'll find little stories within the bigger story. And the Displacements, I had this digital online project that I kind of mocked up, and you see like 8 or 9 excerpts from it. The main narrative follows the story of a family dealing with the aftermath of this huge hurricane, but then you get little excerpts, first person testimonies, other people's stories that are written in retrospect, where people come in and tell you how the hurricane affected them. And that's definitely inspired by my love of, stories within stories and frame narratives from the Middle Ages. And the reason I did that is to in order to give a much bigger framework to the small story of this family, so you could see the context of it and how it ramified nationally. So you'd see their story as part of a much bigger national story. Yeah, I'm sure there's many other ways too that it's influenced me.
That's
I
awesome.
don't I don't write on parchment, but
Amy Anderson, you're up next from also Michigan.
Yes. Hey, Bruce, this is amazing. Thank you so much for
of
taking your
course.
time. Congratulations. And I cannot wait to read. I'm in the hold list at the library, but there's 46 people in front of me in my little country town. So,
Oh my God, 46.
um,
Why aren't these libraries ordering more?
yeah, I
Truly.
might pull the trigger on purchasing. So you're selling me today, Bruce.
Good, good.
Hey, I have two quick questions. One is, could you please share about your writing rhythm with all the other things you have going on with your family and with your work as a
Mhm.
professor? And then as you were going around, the second question is, when you're speaking about AI, now that you're the expert, right? Which is very cool. What is your most important takeaway? What do you most want people to know and understand about our responsibility when it comes to AI, or what you predict or notice in the themes? And to Kyle's point, it's changing all the time. So
Yeah.
writing rhythm and what's the takeaway on AI? And thank you
I'll,
so
I'll
much.
Of course, yeah. Thank you, Amy. I'll answer the second one first. The takeaway of this book, a novel, as I often say, is not I write about contemporary political issues. My novels have been called these kind of moral thrillers. Um, but a novel is not an op-ed. I think it's not an opinion piece. It's not evangelizing for one thing or another. It's a story, right? I want to tell a good story. And in this case, the story happens to be about this very morally weighted problem of AI in our lives. And I suppose, though, if it does have one moral message, it's slow down. Slow down and think and be deliberate. Don't make rash decisions about this technology. And I feel like my university has already failed in that way, that it's, already like partnering with all these AI firms to bring in these LLMs. And so I feel like the message is kind of Lorelei through the lens of Lorelei. Just can we please stop, take a pause, and think before we leap into this new world, even though we're already in the middle of it. But can we, as we jump into different depths of pools, can we stop a little bit and wait and see? So that I think is the message. Um, and then about my writing process, um, there a process? The process is basically getting up, slogging down to the kitchen. I am a very early riser, and probably being an early riser, and I'm not a long sleeper. That's probably the only key to me is I do all my writing, or I do most of my writing early in the morning. My younger son, Malcolm, he's 22 now, lives in New York, and he just, after the first 6 months, he would just wake up like clockwork every morning at about 4:30 or 5 for the next 7 or 8 years. And so and I would be the early person who would give him breakfast and get him ready for the day. And that basically just reset my inner clock. So then by the time that he was sleeping later, I was just waking up at 4:30 naturally. And now I still do all these years later. And that's what enabled me to finish my first novel. And that's when I do most of my writing now. So I owe it all to a poorly sleeping child, basically. But my process is, sitting on a couch with very poor posture and hammering out. And you're probably also asking technically, like writing fiction. I am not an outliner. I'm very much a seat of the pants writer. I kind of know the main thing I know about the arc of my novels is how I want you to feel when you close the novel, when you get to the end. I know exactly from the beginning, I kind of know how I want you to feel. And then it's just a matter of getting you there. And I think a lot about character arcs. I think about writing chapter. I think about the chapter as a formal unit, and just like a lyric poem, and I agonize about my chapters, where they begin and end, how to break them up, how to make them shorter, how to make them more compelling. Also, and this is a big one that I teach in my writing workshops, how to string them together and think about chapters in sequences, and also how chapters help us move through time. Um, Yeah, so now I could go down all kinds of rabbit holes there, but that's where I am. And always, feel free to write me. I'm happy to answer these kinds of questions. I'm easy to find.
Bruce, thank you. John Van Sloten is joining us from Calgary, Alberta. John, go ahead with your question.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Bruce. And you may have already answered my question in answering Amy's question, but I'll ask it anyway. I'm a theologian who writes books. Who All my books are based on the idea that human beings are made in the image of a God who made everything. So I've been observing AI and listening on this call, keep thinking, okay, people who make AI, who make intelligence in that context, are made in the image of a God who made intelligence. So, having explored culpability in the context of AI, I'm wondering how it's changed how you steward your intelligence. How has culpability for you been transformed?
It's a wonderful question. Well, let me answer it a bit obliquely. The title of, as a theologian, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of felix culpa, happy guilt, right? And this goes back to the other question about medieval inspirations. Um, so the idea in medieval Christian theology is that the fall of Adam and Eve, the exile from paradise, the fall of humanity, original sin, it's good. It's a kind of so culpability is it's a happy guilt, felix culpa. And it's a happy guilt because without the fall of Adam and Eve, we wouldn't have need to be saved, and therefore we wouldn't have Jesus Christ, right? And so our collective guilt as a result of what Adam and Eve did in that garden with that apple and that snake, um, that's a good thing. And so this is not my position. This is medieval theology. And so our guilt is kind of collective, right? And it's a good thing that we have this guilt, that we're thinking about our responsibility all the time. And I think in the world of AI, Lorelei is in this novel, Lorelei Shaw is writing almost theologically. Now that you think of it, John, it's a helpful way of, she believes, she's a true believer. She's a doomer, but she's also a true believer in making these systems as good as they can be. And she almost feels this kind of divine compulsion, I think, when she's making these systems to build morality into them, almost in a theological sense. You'll see throughout the course of the novel, like at the beginning, um, here, you see that epigraph. We all put a lot of epigraphs in our fiction. In this case, the epigraph is written by one of the characters. It's Lorelei, and it comes from a book that she calls Silicon Souls on the culpability of artificial minds. And you get little excerpts from it over the course of the novel. And so she's thinking about the soul in relation to AI, and she definitely is a believer in the coming of artificial general intelligence. She thinks of um, these systems as beings that have moral responsibility, and it's her job, it's our job as humans to build moral responsibility into them. She wants machines to be good, just as we train ourselves to be good. So all those questions for her are theological now, or like implicitly theological, I think. Now, I wasn't really thinking about religion or spirituality when I was writing this. It's not the way I approach these things, but just inventing a character who had that approach. Maybe that sort of answers your question.
That's good. That's good. Since we're in Canada, Susan Fish is in a coffee shop or somewhere where it's quite noisy, but her rather cheeky question, and it's appropriate for Susan from Canada to be asking a cheeky question, is Bruce, did you use AI for the writing of this book?
Absolutely not. No, I did not.
Nicely done.
Is she using AI in that very busy coffee shop for her writing?
All right, let's see if she will respond. Uh,
Yeah. But
I
I will say this. I think we worry a little too much about that in the creative world, about writing and specifically, There's a wonderful story by Sheila Heti in the New Yorker from I think a year and a half ago, that she wrote in collaboration with Claude. And all you get in the short story are Claude's responses to her prompts, and she doesn't give us the prompts. And it's a really haunting story. So I don't know. It's not. It doesn't attract me as a way of writing, but and I, at least three of my books have been pirated for AI. We know that from just looking at the database. So, there's all these lawsuits, but I also think writers get a little too worried about it. And I don't know. I think there's so much slop out there, that the more we can do to write in our own words and push back, the better. But I don't know. I don't particularly lose a lot of sleep about that aspect of it.
And to clarify, Bruce, she just said a no here. Did you use AI as a research assistant in any way, or have you?
Not really as a research. I mean, occasionally I'll use it the same way I'll use Google. But I did a lot of experiments with it to see the sorts of things it can do, just because I wanted to know what I was talking about. But nothing that interesting. And there's a question in the chat. Yeah, oh yeah, Curtis Sittenfeld. She also for the New York Times, I think, wrote a side-by-side story where she was, given the same prompt to write a story. She did it herself, and then she had AI do it. So I think that's there's a lot of that kind of thing going on. To
Yeah.
say nothing again of all the slop that, I mean, Don, as an agent, you're probably getting a bunch of it, I would imagine. AI generated stories,
Yes, indeed.
novels. Yeah.
Bruce, I like to respect everybody's time and
Mhm.
how each one is busy. So I like to finish at around the 45. Before we go, I wonder if you're looking at you have several novels in your backlist. You're talking to a group of writers, hopeful their book is going to be acquired or hits a bestseller list, or may I be brash enough to say maybe Oprah would read them? What words of encouragement or even hope do you give to this roster today, this morning?
Mhm. Yes. Okay. So th this particular group, I would say, um, my biggest piece of advice is chances are, tell me if you can nod along if this is true. You've got a manuscript or your manuscript is almost done, right? Maybe you're querying right now for an agent. Maybe you are sending it in to, maybe you've got a couple agents reading a full manuscript for you right now. Maybe you're discouraged because you keep not hearing from people or you've gotten close. Um, Move on to the next thing right away. Don't look back. Once you've got a manuscript polished and ready to query and stop thinking about it. Don't try to improve it. Don't do anything. Just write your next project because if you finished a manuscript, you've already that's a big triumph. I didn't find an agent until I'd written my fourth manuscript, my fourth novel all the way through. And I wish someone had stepped in and, told me to find a good developmental editor to tell me what my issues were. But the main thing I did is just kept writing. And I know that's the oldest cliche in the book is persistence, butt and seat. But I will say that specifically about not getting hung up on that first manuscript. Not like I wrote my book already. I desperately wanted to get published. Why is no one recognizing this book? Um, you will double your chances by having two books. You will triple your chances by having three books, right? So it's not that you're going to keep querying those first two. It's that you keep learning. You're only going to learn by writing. That's another thing that AI is doing to us. I think I worry about young writers in particular about, substituting slop for craft. But the more you can do to just forget about the thing that you're proud of, and move on to the next thing, because you will have learned more about character, about story, exposition, dialogue. That's my main piece of advice.
Bruce, that's wonderful. Yes, keep writing. A number of you have sent me your manuscripts. Kyle, I'm looking at you. You sent me your second one. So you're paying attention to what Bruce is saying because it can be quite discouraging, waiting. You send the proposal out. I think it's quite a lot harder today than it was, say, even 10 years ago. But
Yeah. Speaking of, can I just say something about that?
please.
And I'm going really inside baseball and throwing myself on your mercy here and asking for your discretion. So, I got dropped by Riverhead, who had done my last two novels. The Gifted School did really well. Then my next novel, The Displacements, didn't do so well. I was trying to get my editor, who I just loved, interested in a couple new proposals. She wasn't. And I decided I needed to go find a new agent. And I queried 25, 30 agents and got two offers. And this is someone who has published four books with a major press. Um, and I sold this novel by the skin of my teeth to Spiegel and Grau, or my agent did, after a lot of rejection. And Oprah Winfrey picked it for a book club. So I've heard 1,000 stories like this from fellow writers. It's not all luck, but a huge amount of it is luck and about whether the person reading your manuscript has had their second cup of coffee that morning, right? So do not give up and just realize there's all these ridiculous stories like mine. It is absolutely absurd that this novel got picked for Oprah after everything that I dealt with in the last 5 years. So, do not give up. I'm sorry to sound so preachy, but yeah.
Echoing Winston Churchill. Bruce,
Yeah.
this has been delightful. Can you give
We'll
me
fight them on the, yeah.
can you give us a little tease? What are you working on that we can look forward to in 26 or 27 or 28?
Yeah, well, I have no superstition about it, about talking about my next project, but I'm also very aware that it might not get under contract, so who knows? But it's a novel about uh, speaking of contemporary issues, it's about the so-called masculinity crisis, and it's about fathers and sons and the whole kind of very fraught issue of masculinity in our culture. But it's another family drama. It's not just about boys and men. It's about several families and the way they clash and the way that they're dealing with this problem. It's got a shady father-son wilderness program at the center of it. So that's where I am right now.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. That's amazing. Well, the book is Culpability. And just so you know, a couple of you are going to have your names drawn, and we'll get a copy sent to you. And thank you, Spiegel and Grau, for making that happen. They're good friends. Always fun to get their titles. Thank you, Bruce, again for joining us and being available. And we wish you every success both in your trade writing and also as you enter your fall term and your
great.
whatever your studies are.
Thank you for having me, Don, and thank you all for being here and listening. So, yeah,
Bye now.
bye-bye.
And we'll see you all next month.